Welcome to Southwest Lexington. Today I'm standing right here in Firebrook Estates, right close to the Jessamine County line to our south and Horses to our west. And what you may not realize about this wonderful area is there's a lot of historic homes and landscapes and beautiful ecological areas that are really secrets in this area, and it's my pleasure today to introduce them to you. I'm Amanda Mays Bledsoe, and I'm here with Talk of the 10th. And we're getting ready to talk to some very special neighborhood leaders who have really dedicated countless hours to preserving the historic nature of this area and making sure it's passed on for future generations. So come on inside, I want to take a look. Here we are inside the beautiful Firebrook Historic Mansion, and I'm joined by two special guests. First, we have with us Donna Hewitt, who is the genealogical researcher and Firebrook historian, and Zetta Wellman, who's the executive property manager for Firebrook Estate. So Donna, let's start with you. You know, this is a very special neighborhood, and we have somebody who cares so much about the history and the special uniqueness of this area. Why don't you talk a little bit about how you got here and the nature of this building?
How we got here and the nature. I've lived in the subdivision for 25 years. Our board has gotten interested in these two historic buildings that are out here. I was asked to look into this, and I've gotten rather tied up in it, and I'm excited and having fun. But the first thing I discovered, I went to the Library of Virginia website, and most of the land here, at one time we were French territory, and after the French and Indian War, to settle the area, there were these land grants given by King George III, and it was a proclamation of 1763. One of those got into the hands of Lewis Craig, and Lewis Craig, and it was all written and signed by Thomas Jefferson, by the way, and so we think we're going to frame that little thing and put it up here on a history wall as something that we have in mind to do. But at any rate, Lewis Craig was the one who there's books called The Traveling Church that he brought 600 of his Baptist flock from Virginia over the Cumberland Gap. Took them a couple of years to get here, but they actually settled where the South Elkhorn Christian Church is down here. At any rate, that was the beginnings. Lewis Craig stayed here about 9 years and started selling off parcels. And one parcel he sold was to a gentleman, Elijah Cartmel, and that was in 1793. So Elijah Cartmel had come in, I'd never really heard of him, started researching and found out that there is a very firm connection between, there's a brick structure behind us, smaller than the mansion, but it's a 2/2 and was probably built 1792, 1793 by the Cartmels. So we're kind of certain of the age of that house because of some wills, people passed away, siblings exchanged deeds of land, and all this sort of thing happened. And that's a long story. But as that happened, we believe this house was started between 1820 and 1830, somewhere in here. Eventually, Joseph Bryan and his wife Margaret lived here. Daniel Bryan, who was Joseph's father, became a widower and older and moved in with them, and then persuaded Joseph to build Wetlands. And so the original Bryan home had been a stone structure, a small one, similar to the house we have out back in size probably. And so the Wetland then was built between 1844 and 1848, I believe. And so then when Joseph and Margaret moved out, one of the Cartmel sons moved into this house for a while. This was a time when Lexington was the Athens of the West. You had the first newspaper in Lexington, you had the first theater in West Lexington, you had all kinds of things going on, and you find Elijah Cartmel's name on all sorts of executors of estates and doing inventories and whatnot. And his contemporaries in this area were Abraham Bowman, as in Bowman's Mill, and Levi Todd, and John Higbee, as in Higbee Mill. So they were quite the center of activity in Lexington, even though it's probably was quite a trek from here to Lexington.
Oh, I can imagine.
Back in those days.
And speaking of the structures, Zetta, why don't you talk a little bit about the exterior renovation that you've done in the last couple of years to bring this back to fruition, if you will?
We had to do a lot of research on the building itself on the outside. There was a lot of tuck pointing, a lot of paint peeling, but we had to find a company that could still restore the building and keep it. So we did find a company, and they came in, and just the scraping of the building and also the tuck pointing where most of the mortar had all fallen apart and some of the brick. So we were able to seal the building, paint the building, and keep the structure of the building without it deteriorating around us. And that's a very big part of it. Also this year, all the shutters have been removed and they're very fragile. So we're finding someone now to compose the shutters back together so we can have the original shutters on the building. But the stonework, the foundation around this building, it's actually Kentucky native stone, which is amazing. And believe it or not, it was in better shape than the brick. Mm-hmm. So we did very little all to the stone itself. And then now our next focus, after we get the shutters and the side steps fixed, we're focusing on the guest house, and we're going to restore it.
Anything unique about this area inside? Any room you particularly want to mention? Or?
Well, actually, it's the doors themselves. All the doors, as you can see, they're mostly 4 and 6 paneled doors, and they're solid. They're not like we have nowadays where they're hollow. The doors are very heavy. The hinges on the doors are very nice. The floor itself is original. And all you have to do is just basically mop and clean because they're so beautiful. The fireplaces themselves are all original to the building. If you notice underneath all the windows, you have like paneling there. That was to this property. That's what it should look like. So really inside, Firebrook themselves have kept the inside of the building to its original.
Fantastic. We're going to come back in just a minute and show you how you can come out here and see it for yourself. This is one of my most favorite views when you're driving down Harrisburg Road. This mansion is just stunning and the front columns are beautiful. And I know what you're thinking, how can I be here? So here I'm joined with Christina Dudek, who's Vice President of the Firebrook Estates and also a realtor. Christina, how would you use or could you rent this property?
We decided to open the mansion up this year and last year for 2 reasons. One was just so we could share it with the community because we just love the history of it, and everyone's always curious about what the inside looks like. So we decided that we would open it up for events, and we can do it in tandem with our clubhouse. We just think that this backdrop is beautiful for a wedding or a tea or a shower, and we've had Easter egg hunts here. We really just wanted it to make it part of the whole community instead of just our neighborhood. So we do rent this. We rent the back porch area, which you can put tents up. We've had beautiful weddings out here. So you'd be between the 2 historic buildings, and it's just something that we thought would be a great way to, one, help us cut the expenses of maintaining the properties, and then sharing it also with everybody in Lexington.
I'm so glad you made that decision. How would someone do that? Do they call you? What's your website for it?
Yes, we have a property manager, Debbie Wheeler. She's on site and she does an excellent job of coordinating events and handling our calendar. So if you call her at 219-0035, she can give you rates and availability.
Fantastic. It's a beautiful area, and it's not just about the historic mansion. We've been talking about preserving that, but it's also about the landscape around us. So we're going to step overside and talk about how beautiful the lake is and what they're doing to make sure that stays for a long time. If you've ever driven down Harrisburg Road, you've likely seen the beautiful fountains and lake down here at Firebrook Estates. But it's not just beautiful, it's really special and ecologically really a treasure for South Lexington. So I'm here with Dr. Vickie Homburg, who's a Firebrook Estates member, secretary, but really you're the Wetlands Watershed Watch volunteer, and you've done a lot of work in this area. Why don't you share with us a little bit of what makes this so special?
Well, we're standing, for instance, in the watershed of the South Elkhorn Creek, and this is a beautiful area where the first pioneers would have seen American bison, they would have seen eastern elk, and they would have seen passenger pigeons, and those would have been great sustenance for the earliest settlers. Later on, we had agricultural and livestock enterprises being developed, and but we still have remnants of what the earliest people here would have seen. And if you walk out of the historic Firebrook mansion, you look over in the meadows across the way. Often in the spring you can see a beautiful veil of what looks like snow or frost, but in actuality this is the bloom of the spring beauty, a very beloved little wildflower that is very small actually, but in mass has a striking effect. Native Americans knew that this plant was edible and harvested the small roots for soups and stews and taught settlers to do the same thing. The reason we have a bloom of the spring beauty up here is because the uplands were never plowed. There was grazing on the uplands, but the root systems were never disrupted by plowing or chemical treatments, and so we still have that. So when we have a beautiful area like this with historic architecture, and we're conserving the architecture in the grounds, we're also conserving some hotspots of biodiversity. We have another beautiful native colony of wild hyacinths, an ethereal blue flower that's very rare, and that is also found on our grounds. The Firebrook Wetlands is an area where we have a certified monarch way station. Many of you may be aware that we have a close relationship between the monarch butterfly and the milkweed, but there are other pollinators that have to have specific wildflowers that are native to this continent. And so we've reintroduced a lot of native plants in the wetlands so that we provide sustenance for these species as well. We have lakes that attract migratory waterfowl, and we've seen a great variety of those. Settlers would have seen the same animals because they are in these migratory flyways for thousands of years, and we see osprey, eagles, egrets. We see many types of ducks, mergansers, redheads, and many others.
It's a beautiful area, and if you've not been out to Firebrook Estates, you might miss it. So I urge you to come on by, take a look at the historic mansion, look at the historic grounds really that you have here, and actually walk down by the lake. You can actually walk around parts of it at least, and take for yourself one of the beautiful and historic areas in South Lexington. Thanks for watching Talk of the 10th.